And did I now think Miss Ingram such a choice as Mr. Rochester would be likely to make? I could not tell. I did not know his taste in female beauty. If he liked the majestic, she was the very type of majesty. Then she was accomplished, sprightly. Most gentlemen would admire her, I thought, and that he did admire her I already seemed to have obtained proof. To remove the last shade of doubt, it remained but to see them together. So Jane is suspecting that Mr. Rochester does like Blanche Ingram. You are not to suppose, reader, that Adele has all this time been sitting motionless on the stool at my feet. No, when the ladies entered, she rose, advanced to meet them, made a stately reverence, and said with gravity, "Bonjour, mesdames," which just means hello, ladies. And Miss Ingram had looked down at her with a mocking air and exclaimed, "Oh, what a little puppet!" Lady Lynn had remarked, "It is Mr. Rochester's ward, I suppose, the little French girl he was speaking of." Mrs. Dent had kindly taken her hand and given her a kiss. Amy and Louisa Eshton had cried out simultaneously, "What a love of a child!" And then they had called her to a sofa, where she now sat ensconced between them, chattering alternately in French and broken English, absorbing not only the young lady's attention, but that of Mrs. Eshton and Lady Lynn, and getting spoilt to her heart's content. At last coffee is brought in, and the gentlemen are summoned. So you will probably notice, I hope, that between this paragraph and the previous paragraph, there's a shift in tense. So you go from past tense, and then they had called her to a sofa, so that happened in the past. And then we're shifting to the present here. At last, coffee is brought in. So usually Charlotte Brontë does this when something exciting or dramatic or a particular interest to Jane is about to happen. So something is coming, and by switching to present tense, which we don't typically do, it's usually considered kind of a grammatical faux pas or error nowadays. But you do still have sometimes authors who do this, where if you switch to the present tense, you're sort of signaling to the reader that even though this is taking place in the past, the narrator telling the story, in this case Jane, feels like it's happening, or it's kind of brought back to that moment. So this is all very present, quite literally, but it's really immediate and dramatic, at least to Jane, and hopefully to us as we read. At last coffee is brought in, and the gentlemen are summoned. I sit in the shade, if any shade there be in this brilliantly lit apartment. The window curtain half hides me. Again the arch yawns, they come. The collective appearance of the gentlemen, like that of the ladies, is very imposing. They are all costumed in black, most of them are tall, some young. Henry and Frederick Lynn are very dashing sparks indeed, and Colonel Dent is a fine soldierly man. Mr. Eshton, the magistrate of the district, is gentlemanlike. His hair is quite white, his eyebrows and whiskers still dark, which gives him something of the appearance of a père noble de theatre. Lord Ingram, like his sisters, is very tall. Like them also, he is handsome, but he shares Mary's apathetic and listless look. He seems to have more length of limb than vivacity or blood or vigor of brain. Ouch. So apparently Lord Ingram, so the Ingram's brothers, is handsome, but he's kind of like bored looking, is not very animated, and there's a little bit of a nice insult there. He seems to have more length of limb, so he's more tall than he is vivacious of blood or vigor of brain. So he's maybe not the sharpest, and he's not very lively. So he's taller than he is lively or smart. And where is Mr. Rochester? He comes in last. I'm not looking at the arch, yet I see him enter. I try to concentrate my attention on those netting needles, on the meshes of the purse I am forming. I wish to think only of the work I have in my hands, to see only the silver beads and silk threads that lie in my lap, whereas I distinctly behold his figure, and I inevitably recall the moment when I last saw it, just after I had rendered him what he deemed an essential service, and he, holding my hand and looking down on my face, surveyed me with eyes that revealed a heart full and eager to overflow, in whose emotions I had a part. How near had I approached him at that moment? What had occurred since calculated to change his and my relative positions? Yet now, how distant, how far estranged we were. So far estranged that I did not expect him to come and speak to me. I did not wonder when, without looking at me, he took a seat at the other side of the room and began conversing with some of the ladies. So Jane wants to focus on what she's doing, but of course she's drawn to Mr. Rochester, and he's very cold and distant, although she's brought back to the last time she saw him after she saved his life, and she's thinking how happy he looked, and now he's so cold and distant, just totally ignoring her. No sooner did I see that his attention was riveted on them, and that I might gaze without being observed, than my eyes were drawn involuntarily to his face. I could not keep their lids under control. They would rise, and the iris would fix on him. I looked and had an acute pleasure in looking, a precious yet poignant pleasure, pure gold with a steely point of agony, a pleasure like what the thirst-perishing man might feel who knows the well to which he has crept is poisoned, yet stoops and drinks divine draughts nevertheless. So she knows that it's maybe not the healthiest thing to be looking at Mr. Rochester, but she is anyway. Most true is it that beauty is in the eye of the gazer. My master's colorless olive face, square, massive brow, broad and jetty eyebrows, deep eyes, strong features, firm, grim mouth, all energy, decision, will, were not beautiful according to rule, but they were more than beautiful to me. They were full of an interest and influence that quite mastered me, that took my feelings from my own power and fettered them in his. I had not intended to love him. The reader knows I had wrought hard to extirpate from my soul the germs of love there detected, and now, at the first renewed view of him, they spontaneously arrived, green and strong. He made me love him without looking at me. So she's in pretty deep. She really does love him, even though she may know that this is not the wisest course of action. She can't help it. I compared him with his guests. What was the gallant grace of the Lynns, the languid elegance of Lord Ingram, even the military distinction of Colonel Dent, contrasted with his look of native pith and genuine power? I had no sympathy in their appearance, their expression, yet I could imagine that most observers would call them attractive, handsome, imposing, while they would pronounce Mr. Rochester at once harsh-featured and melancholy-looking. I saw them smile, laugh. It was nothing. The light of the candles had as much soul in it as their smile, the tinkle of the bell as much significance as their laugh. I saw Mr. Rochester smile. His stern features softened, his eye grew both brilliant and gentle, its ray both searching and sweet. He was talking at the moment to Louisa and Amy Ashton. I wondered to see them receive with calm that look which seemed to me so penetrating. I expected their eyes to fall, their color to rise under it. Yet I was glad when I found they were in no sense moved. He is not to them what he is to me, I thought. He is not of their kind. I feel akin to him. I believe he is of mine. I am sure he is. I feel akin to him. I understand the language of his countenance and movements. Though rank and wealth sever us widely, I have something in my brain and heart, in my blood and nerves, that assimilates me mentally to him. Did I say a few days since that I had nothing to do with him but to receive my salary at his hands? Did I forbid myself to think of him in any other light than as a paymaster? Blasphemy against nature. Every good, true, vigorous feeling I have gathers impulsively round him. I know I must conceal my sentiments. I must smother hope. I must remember that he cannot care much for me. For when I say that I am of his kind, I do not mean that I have his force to influence, and his spell to attract. I mean only that I have certain tastes and feelings in common with him. I must, then, repeat continually that we are forever sundered, and yet, while I breathe and think, I must love him. So again, she's very seriously, in love with Mr. Rochester. She feels like he holds more interest and is closer to her. They have more of an affinity than her and any of the other people in the room. Everyone else just seems kind of shallow and uninteresting in comparison to him. And Jane feels that they're of the same varieties, that they have similar interests and similar likes and similar personalities. Coffee is handed. The ladies, since the gentlemen entered, have become lively as larks. Conversation waxes brisk and merry. Colonel Dent and Mr. Ashton argue on politics. Their wives listen. The two proud dowagers, Lady Lynn and Lady Ingram, confabulate together. Sir George, whom, by the by, I have forgotten to describe, a very big and very fresh-looking country gentleman, stands before their sofa, coffee-cup in hand, and occasionally puts in a word. Mr. Frederick Lynn has taken a seat beside Mary Ingram, and is showing her the engravings of the splendid volume. She looks, smiles now and then, but apparently says little. The tall and phlegmatic Lord Ingram leans with folded arms on the chair back of the little and lively Amy Ashton. She glances up at him and chatters like a wren. She likes him better than she does Mr. Rochester. Henry Lynn has taken possession of an ottoman at the feet of Louisa. Adele shares it with him. He is trying to talk French with her, and Louisa laughs at his blunders. With whom will Blanche Ingram pair? She is standing alone at the table, bending gracefully over an album. She seems waiting to be sought, but she will not wait too long. She herself selects a mate. Mr. Rochester, having quitted the Ashtons, stands on the hearth as solitary as she stands by the table. She confronts him, taking her station to the opposite side of the mantelpiece. Mr. Rochester, I thought you were not fond of children? Nor am I. Then what induced you to take charge of such a little doll as that? Pointing to Adele. Where did you pick her up? I did not pick her up. She was left on my hands. You should have sent her to school. I cannot afford it. Schools are so dear. Why, I suppose you have a governess for her. I saw a person with her just now. Is she gone? Oh no, there she is still, behind the window curtain. You pay her, of course. I should think it quite as expensive. More so, for you have them both to keep in addition. I feared, or should I say hoped, the allusion to me would make Mr. Rochester glance my way, and I involuntarily shrank farther into the shade, but he never turned his eyes. I have not considered the subject, said he indifferently, looking straight before him. No, you men never do consider economy and common sense. You should hear Mamma on the chapter of governesses. Mary and I have had, I should think, a dozen at least in our day, half of them detestable and the rest ridiculous, and all incubi. Were they not, Mamma? Did you speak, my own? The young lady, thus claimed as the dowager's special property, reiterated her question with an explanation. My dearest, don't mention governesses. The word makes me nervous. I have suffered a martyrdom from their incompetency and caprice. I thank heaven I have now done with them. Just to clarify, Jane's in the room. She's sitting kind of away from everyone, and because she's not really the same social class as them, she's not really talking or interacting to these people. She can hear them very well because she's telling us this story. So they're talking about governesses while a governess is in their presence, very much almost ignoring her and treating her like she's an inanimate object, like she's a non-entity. Jane gets a little bit of subtle revenge in her retelling by throwing some shade, as we would say now. She says things like, the young lady thus claimed as the dowager's special property. So Lady Ingram calls Blanche my own, like, you know, my special child kind of a thing. And Jane's kind of like poking fun at that. But she's thinking this to us as we're reading this. She's not saying this out loud, so it's not like Jane has a ready comeback, and it would really be very much out of Jane's place for her to say anything. But they're starting to talk about governesses while she's there. Blanche says that they're all incubi. An incubi is a vampire, but they're also vampires known for like seducing people and then, you know, ruining their lives or killing them. So that's not a very nice thing to call someone, especially not when they're right in front of you, but also not even behind their back. So this should be fun. Mrs. Dent here bent over to the pious lady and whispered something in her ear. I suppose from the answer elicited, it was a reminder that one of the anathemized race was present. So Mrs. Dent seems to be a pretty nice lady, even though she doesn't understand that Blanche was kind of making fun of her before and trailing her. She kind of like whispers like, you know, the governess is over there. Maybe don't talk about governesses in front of governesses. Tant pis, said her ladyship, which means too bad. I hope it may do her good. Then in a lower tone, but still loud enough for me to hear, I noticed her. I am judge of physiognomy, and in hers I see all the faults of her class. What are they, madam? Inquired Mr. Rochester aloud. I will tell you in your private ear, replied she, wagging her turban 3 times with portentous significancy. But my curiosity will be past its appetite. It craves food now. Ask Blanche. She is nearer you than I. Oh, don't refer him to me, mamma. I have just one word to say of the whole tribe. They are a nuisance. Not that I ever suffered much from them. I took care to turn the tables. What tricks Theodore and I used to play on our Miss Wilsons and Mrs. Greys and Madame Jouberts. Mary was always too sleepy to join in a plot with spirit. The best fun was with Madame Joubert. Miss Wilson was a poor, sickly thing, lachrymose and low-spirited, not worth the trouble of vanquishing, in short. And Mrs. Grey was coarse and insensible. No blow took effect on her. But poor Madame Joubert, I see her yet in her raging passions, when we had driven her to extremities, spilt our tea, crumbled our bread and butter, tossed our books up to the ceiling, and played a chiavari with the ruler and desk, the fender and fire irons. Theodore, do you remember those merry days? Yes, to be sure I do, drawled Lord Ingram. And the poor old stick used to cry out, "Oh, you villains, childs!" And then we sermonized her on the presumption of attempting to teach such clever blades as we were, and when she was herself so ignorant. We did, and Tito, you know, I helped you in prosecuting, or persecuting, your tutor, whey-faced Mr. Vining, the parson in the pit, as we used to call him. He and Miss Wilson took the liberty of falling in love with each other. At least Tito and I thought so. We surprised sundry tender glances and sighs, which were interpreted as tokens of la belle passion, the grand passion, or love. And I promise you the public soon had the benefit of our discovery. We employed it as a sort of lever to hoist our dead weights from the house. Dear mamma there, as soon as she got an inkling of the business, found out that it was of an immoral tendency. Did you not, my lady mother? Certainly, my best, and I was quite right. Depend on that. There are 1,000 reasons why liaisons between governesses and tutors should never be tolerated in a moment in any well-regulated house. Firstly, oh gracious mamma, spare us the enumeration. All rest, which is as for the rest, we all know them. Danger of bad example to innocence of childhood, distractions and consequent neglect of duty on the part of the attached, mutual alliance and reliance, confidence thence resulting, insolence accompanying, mutiny and general blow up. Am I right, Baroness Ingram of Ingram Park? My lily flower, you are right now as always. Then no more need be said. Change the subject. So for about a page and a half, 2 pages, at least in my copy of the book, they're just really like ragging on governesses and saying how terrible they are. And Blanche goes into a charming, not really, reverie about how they used to torment all of their governesses and her brother's tutor, and how they used to just play tricks on them and not listen and just be, menaces to them. They talk about how the tutor and the governess fell in love at one point, and they outed their relationship, and Miss Ingram thought it was immoral, and that kind of ruined, at least in the Ingram's eyes, that ruined their ability to work because it led to conspiracy, and then they would have not done their job, et cetera, et cetera. So just very degrading governess commentary. And again, Jane is hearing all of this. Amy Ashton, not hearing or not heeding this dictum, joined in with her soft, infantine tone. Louisa and I used to quiz our governess too, but she was such a good creature she would bear anything. Nothing put her out. She was never cross with us, was she, Louisa? No, never. We might do what we pleased, ransack her desk and her workbox, and turn her drawers inside out, and she was so good-natured she would give us anything we asked for. Same thing with the Ashtons. They would also torment their governesses and go through their desk and, ruin things. It was like a teacher's nightmare. I suppose now, said Miss Ingram, curling her lips sarcastically, we shall have an abstract of the memoirs of all the governesses extant. In order to avert such a visitation, I again move the introduction of a new topic. Mr. Rochester, do you second my motion? Madame, I support you on this point as on every other. Then on me be the onus of bringing it forward. Signor Eduardo, are you in voice tonight? Donna Bianca, if you command it, I will be. Then, Signor, I lay on you my sovereign behest to furbish up your lungs and other vocal organs as they will be wanted on my royal service. So Blanche says we're changing the discussion topic, and she wants Mr. Rochester to sing with her. Who would not be the Rizzio of so divine a Mary? A fig for Rizzio, cried she, tossing her head with all its curls as she moved to the piano. It is my opinion the fiddler David must have been an insipid sort of fellow. I like black Bothwell better. To my mind, a man is nothing without a spice of the devil in him, and history may say what it will of James Hepburn, but I have a notion he was just a sort of wild, fierce, bandit hero whom I could have consented to gift with my hand. So Blanche is talking about different fictional characters, and there may be a historical character mixed in there, but she's talking about something called a Byronic hero, which I'll explain in another video. But basically a Byronic hero is a character who's usually a love interest, usually a male, but not always, and they're very angsty and dramatic. They're a little bit like, have turbulent emotions, but they're also capable of deep love and feeling. So that is apparently the kind of guy that Blanche Ingram likes. Gentlemen, you hear. Now which of you most resembles Bothwell? Cried Mr. Rochester. I should say the preference lies with you, responded Colonel Dent. On my honor, I am much obliged to you, was the reply. Miss Ingram, who had now seated herself with proud grace at the piano, spreading out her snowy robes in queenly amplitude, commenced a brilliant prelude, talking meantime. She appeared to be on her high horse tonight. Both her words and her air seemed intended to excite not only the admiration, but the amazement of her auditors. She was evidently bent on striking them as something very dashing and daring indeed. So Blanche is showing off a little bit here. Oh, I am so sick of the young men of the present day, exclaimed she, rattling away at the instrument. Poor puny things, not fit to stir a step beyond papa's park gates, nor to go even so far without mamma's permission and guardianship. Creatures so absorbed in care about their pretty faces, and their white hands, and their small feet, as if a man had anything to do with beauty, as if loveliness were not the special prerogative of woman, her legitimate appanage and heritage. I grant an ugly woman is a blot on the fair face of creation, but as to the gentlemen, let them be solicitous to possess only strength and valor. Let their motto be hunt, shoot, and fight. The rest is not worth a fillip. Such should be my device were I a man. So Blanche is saying that men should be more traditionally manly and they should not, be afraid of exploring the world and going beyond their parents' homes. And she also says that men shouldn't be worried about their appearance because only women are supposed to be pretty, at least according to Blanche. Whenever I marry, she continued after a pause which none interrupted, I am resolved my husband shall not be a rival but a foil to me. I will suffer no competitor near the throne. I shall exact an undivided homage. His devotion shall not be shared between me and the shape he sees in his mirror. Mr. Rochester, now sing, and I will play for you. I am all obedience, was the response. So then she says Blanche says when she marries, she doesn't want to have to compete with her husband for who's more attractive. She wants to be the pretty one, and her husband will be a foil. Think like a character foil in literature, someone who contrasts with another character, and because they have opposite qualities, they kind of highlight the differences between each person. So Blanche wants to be the pretty one, and her husband, she says, should be manly and kind of ugly. Here then is a Corsair song. Know that I dote on Corsairs, and for that reason sing it con spirito, which is Italian for with spirit. Commands from Miss Ingram's lips would put spirit into a mug of milk and water. Take care then, if you don't please me, I will shame you by showing how such things should be done. That is offering a premium on incapacity. I shall now endeavor to fail. Gardez-vous en bien, which just means be very careful. If you err willfully, I shall devise a proportionate punishment. Miss Ingram ought to be clement, for she has it in her power to inflict a chastisement beyond mortal endurance. Ha! Explain, commanded the lady. Pardon me, madame, no need of explanation. Your own fine sense must inform you that one of your frowns would be a sufficient substitute for capital punishment. Sing, said she, and again touching the piano, she commenced an accompaniment in spirited style. So Blanche and Mr. Rochester are kind of flirting now. Blanche wants him to sing as she plays the piano. She says, sing it with spirit, and then Mr. Rochester says, a command from you is so important, would make even like milk and water have to have spirit in them. And then she says, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to shame you by showing how it should be done. And then Mr. Rochester says, that would be good because then you'd be teaching me how to do something and it's good to spend time with you, etc., etc. So they're just flirting it up. Sing, said she, and again touching the piano, she commenced an accompaniment in spirited style. Now is my time to slip away, thought I, but the tones that then severed the air arrested me. Mrs. Fairfax had said Mr. Rochester possessed a fine voice. He did, a mellow, powerful bass into which he threw his own feeling, his own force, finding a way through the ear to the heart, and there waking sensation strangely. I waited till the last deep and full vibration had expired, till the tide of talk, checked an instant, had resumed its flow. I then quitted my sheltered corner and made my exit by the side door, which was fortunately near. Thence a narrow passage led into the hall, and crossing it, I perceived my sandal was loose. I stopped to tie it, kneeling down for that purpose on the mat at the foot of the staircase. I heard the dining room door unclose. A gentleman came out. Rising hastily, I stood face to face with him. It was Mr. Rochester. How do you do? He asked. I am very well, sir. Why did you not come and speak to me in the room? I thought I might have retorted the question on him who put it, but I would not take that freedom. I answered, I did not wish to disturb you, as you seemed engaged, sir. What have you been doing during my absence? Nothing particular, teaching Adele as usual, and getting a good deal paler than you were, as I saw at first sight. What is the matter? Nothing at all, sir. Did you take any cold that night? You half drowned me? Not the least. Return to the drawing room. You are deserting too early. I am tired, sir. He looked at me for a minute. And a little depressed, he said. What about? Tell me. Nothing, sir. I am not depressed. But I affirm that you are so much depressed that a few more words would bring tears to your eyes. Indeed, they are there now, shining and swimming, and a bead has slipped from the lash and fallen onto the flag. If I had time, and was not in mortal dread of some prating prig of a servant passing, I would know what all this means. Well, tonight I excuse you, but understand that so long as my visitors stay, I expect you to appear in the drawing-room every evening. It is my wish. Don't neglect it. Now go and send Sophie for Adele. Good night, my... He stopped, bit his lip, and abruptly left me. And that's the end of chapter 17. Let me frame what happens at the end of that chapter a little bit differently. So, a girl leaves a party early. Her shoe is loose and she has to stop because something's going on with the shoe. And then the guy she's interested in stops her. If this sounds familiar, it should. It's most definitely a slight Cinderella head nod. So Jane leaves, stops to fix her slipper, and Mr. Rochester shows up and asks what's going on and are you depressed, etc., etc. So that's all we get in chapter 17. Still very mysterious and confusing relationship dynamics.